Rich.
Yeah, no, this is helpful to think about it, like how would we actually do it though, because it's like, okay, so we want to create, of course the lawnmower goes, right, it's really hard.
Yeah,
so we want to create a planning object, and then so yeah, either the requirement or the epic, but I think it would be the requirement, because an epic is just like, how am I going to get the work done, right? Like I'm organizing the work. Requirement is something that like I can functionally test. So real-time collaboration. Okay, so this would be like the dev. So it'd be like API, figure out all the API stuff, right?
Yes.
And then design side.
Requirements can be tested.
Yeah.
Epics,
they need to be able to.
Structure, and I know we always put one yellow epic, but those are multi-level epics. And so like technically in our current world, those could go 7 levels deep. And those would, like the work product inside that would be like, it could roll up and say, okay, to have real-time editing, we've got 4 months of work in this epic for the requirement of real-time.
Right.
And our other one, let's say like tracking, maybe that's only got 2 months of work rolling up into it. And like we could start to see like actual roadmap things. But Mark would have to speak to this. That looks right to me. I wouldn't want to, like I mentioned, I wouldn't want to permanently make requirements a gate, but I do think in our current owned, like he owns requirements, I own epics, Gabe has issues. I do think it makes sense to think about this.
What do you mean by date? Making a date?
Sorry, say that again.
What do you mean by making them a gate? You don't want to make the requirements a gate.
Oh, like, you know how we're going to have a default when we go live in 6 months, we'll have a default structure workflow template, which would just be the way it currently is, which is epics and issues. I'm just saying this would be an optional configuration. You could maybe have 4 levels deep, one of them being requirements, or you could have, that might be the PubSec one, or you could have like the standard default GitLab one, which just rolls initiatives, epics, and issues.
Okay.
And then at some point I'd want one, the agile one where it says epic story to do task or whatever you've got them. Like we could have a whole bunch of different like configurations. This sounds like PubSec configuration.
Yeah. And then, okay, let me think about that too. I mean, we should probably have requirements and make it probably easier for the test engineers, but you know, like this is kind of confusing because I can't imagine a task would necessarily be testable. That'd be more like, okay, well, let's think through it. Okay, so
yeah,
for Epic month 1, developers need to figure out like an API. What would an issue there be?
I would say too, the epic wouldn't necessarily, I don't know, scope to month 1, but I'm more saying like,
yeah,
it would be rolled up that it is a month long or 3 months long from its children. Like you'd start to see road mapping summations there, but those would technically be features like build the database or something, build their build level functionality that has actionable issues beneath.
I think I know what you mean. I'm like not translating it. So,
yeah.
So an issue might be that like can edit title, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't know what the task would be. I mean, the task I guess could be like Holly creates mocks, you know, really, or whatever.
Could have multiple.
And then, I mean, the MR could come from that, but I think the test case would come from.
I think that the MR could come off of issues or tasks.
Yep, I think so. Kind of depends on what you want.
Maybe at some like point, do MRs come off anything? Can they? Epics, I mean, every single part of this would have the ability to do what an issue can do. merge requests could be spawned from any of these objects, I think. I mean, you could force a hierarchy to keep things simple, like maybe my work, maybe that's a part of setting up your project. My MRs always come off of my issue level or my task level or my story. Or maybe someone goes really high level and it's like only MRs off a requirement.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I don't know if that would make sense. Well, that's where requirements are weird because they're not spanning objects. They're like tracing objects, right? Like,
I wonder if they'd be off to the side in their own thing and then they would relate in versus being like a level in the hierarchy. They would be almost their own hierarchy, which then intelligently just relates to other things. That could be another way to look at it.
Yeah, because they're not really. Yeah, I know what you mean. They're like not the same thing. They're like, what is a good way to describe them? I don't know, but they're not a planning object. They're more of like a group that just groups things together so you can track it, right? Like
it's like a tag, like a label in that sense where you're just able to label anything as satisfying the requirement.
Mm-hmm. And
which is it breaks the model a little if that's how it works. I think
that's what it is. Like, I don't think requirements, I mean, again, to your point, it's like Mark's call, but like, I don't know why they would have labels and assignees and stuff like that. Cause it's just like, it's almost more like how, like the current epic, right?
Yeah. Or like a elevated label that's like global, that has more meat to it, like a description. And although labels do, that's how I was initially thinking of initiatives or OKRs, because like Christy wanted to put them on everything. And like the initiative would behave, it's almost like some of these planning objects will behave in a taxonomy model where they could label anything, or in the true, I'm following this waterfall hierarchy and I only have parents and childs, but then there's these other kind of weird ones that could just go in there and label anything or like connect to anything.
Right. Is it connect to anything? Is the requirement like a workflow state almost? Like doing and done almost, right? It's like this requirement is in the backlog and we're like not working on the things within it yet. We're working on it right now and it's not complete yet, and it's or it's done and satisfied because all the test cases have passed.
Right. And maybe if this relational model works and you could see all of the children that relate to it in a view, you could get more insight onto progress. Like, where are we at? We're done 30% of the work for this requirement.
Yeah.
Or
and you can see like what's tested and like what's like when I was looking at like literal requirements, or I guess like quality management, I'm kind of like, okay, like what does that look like, right? And then it would be like, okay, I'm looking at a requirement, like here's requirement one, and then within requirement one, here's like maybe the navigation basically, right? So I'm like, okay, there's this epic, there's all the issues within it, and then like, here are the test cases tied to each, or like, I guess we could do it this way too with like swim lanes, right? And so you see how all the things are kind of tied together.
Yeah, it might be closer to an OKR, the way that would work. Yeah, like, because it has everything under it. So that might be a key differentiator on some of our planning objects. They either participate in the formal hierarchy or they are more generic that could relate to anything, get its fingers in anywhere.
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, maybe that would be a fun thing to suss out with Mark. Like, what is this thing? Because yeah, it's just like, I think it's more just to house all this. Like, it's an organizational, like you said, kind of like OKR, and then you within each are kind of tracking all these test cases, and the engineers can better track what they need to test, right? So
yeah,
I don't know.
That's cool.
Anyway, I don't.
I'm stopping the recording.